Welcome back. US forces have begun to withdraw from their largest military base in northeast Syria, marking a major decrease in the American presence there. Damascus is consolidating control and will now lead anti-ISIS operations. At the same time, Syrian authorities have officially closed the notorious Al-Hol prison camp that was once home to tens of thousands of relatives of Islamic State fighters. But not all the former inmates are accounted for, and that's raising security concerns, not just in Syria, but across the region. Our senior Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osseran, is still with us. So, Ariel, the Americans are finally definitively leaving Syria, a country that's never really been a priority for President Trump, has it?
No, it hasn't. They still have forces in one base in Kharab al-Jir. But today, with the second convoy leaving the Kasrak base, following the evacuation of the Shaddadi and Al-Tanf, there's a clear movement here, and that is outwards by American forces. Now, what is interesting is where are they taking their military capabilities? They're not flying them back to the U.S., at least not immediately. They're taking them to Iraqi Kurdistan region. And so this would appear to be their new center of operations in that former ISIS-controlled area, even though Kurdistan was never under ISIS control, but they don't want to leave the region completely. Also, if you ask U.S. officials, they will say, at least on record, that this is reversible at a moment's notice. And so in order to keep that flexibility, they want to maintain presence just along the border. And if you couple with that, the increasing involvement of Iraq with basically taking the baton from the Kurdish-led SDF in overseeing the ISIS detainees, now this is happening in Iraq. And so the U.S. is kind of moving its forces over there to be closer to the threat. But in terms of what this means for Syria, this means that, in fact, the largest foreign military presence right now in Syria is by the Russians. Still, at least officially, Turkey doesn't have...
They managed to hold on to that.
Officially, Turkey doesn't have bases in Syria. The Russians have Latakia and Khmeimim, and so this would, that they maintain that status quo. But as far as the Americans are concerned, they do not want to keep the status quo. They want to put more authority on Damascus and everything that has to do with combating ISIS. And so they are repositioning their forces. I think for anyone who sees ISIS as a re-emerging threat, this may be concerning. And so it'll be very interesting to see how long these forces stay in Iraqi Kurdistan before they decide to make their way back to Syria, if at all.
Yeah, interesting. And the reason those American troops were there in the first place was to defeat ISIS, the terrorist group that kind of sprang into everybody's consciousness well over a decade ago. And the Kurds have been guarding these prison camps, not just with the ISIS terrorists themselves, but also their wives, children, some people who were brought from Europe, America, all across the world as children, and they ended up living in prison camps. The Kurds have been saying for years, haven't they, please take back your citizens. Many of them escaped. It was a very chaotic process, wasn't it, when the Syrian forces swept across Syria. That is a concern in Syria. Is that also a concern for Israel?
Well, so first, just to kind of close that dynamic that you outlined, you had the Kurds guarding the ISIS operatives and their members, and their family members, and basically you had American forces guarding the SDF. But then when the Syrian government forces advanced, the American troops stayed in their bases and simply allowed this quote-unquote agreement between Damascus and the SDF to take form, which cost many Kurdish lives. But ultimately, as far as Israel is concerned, there are accusations against Israel that it did not insist enough to protect the Kurds as it did with the Druze. But ultimately, Israel here is seeking a security agreement with Syria. And as far as we know from Damascus, from our reporting throughout this past year, the Damascus is seeking Israeli commitment not to get involved in domestic affairs. And so with the issue of the Druze kind of at the top of that threshold, it's simply a level that the Kurds don't meet in terms of Israel's own interests as much as maybe others would like
Israel's
to see.
Security interests are in southern Syria, aren't they?
But also domestic interest with the issue of the Druze in Israel. There isn't a large Kurdish community, a unified one that seeks to protect its brethren along the border. And so you don't have that same lobby effective lobby with regards to Israel's intervention.
Although I do remember the
Kurds.
Foreign Minister, Gideon Saar, saying clearly the Kurds are Israel's natural allies. So
He said it clearly, but the government didn't really do much.
Yeah, Ariel, thank you very much.